Hello and welcome to another episode of Planet Holyrood, the Scottish politics podcast that I know is keeping many MSPs entertained during their summer holidays. I'm Chris McCall, I'm the Deputy Political Editor at the Daily Record, and I'm joined here in our Glasgow office today by Douglas Dickey, the Content Editor at the Scottish Daily Express, and by Ruth Souter, who is the Chief Live Reporter at the Daily Record. Now, we're starting this episode by answering the questions that everyone's been asking this week. Who is Andy Burnham? What does he want? And does he really know where Dundee is? I am, of course, referring to his big speech, which was made by the PM in waiting on Monday, where he announced that power must be transferred out of Whitehall, so, quote, the growth can be nurtured from the bottom up. And he also said, just let me get this, new opportunities to extend devolution are something that he wants in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And in a swipe at the SNP, Burnham also said that the people of Dundee and Bangor feel just as distant from Holyrood and the Senate as they do from Westminster. So Ruth, I'll come to you first. What do you make of Burnham? Are you sold on this big vision he has for the UK?
I'm sceptical, but I do think that he thinks outside the box.
Okay.
If you look at his career, he's done 9 years as the Manchester Mayor.
Yep.
So if you look at the problems Manchester faces, there's a lot of poverty, homelessness, drugs misuse, problems that are quite parallel to the issues that we face here in Scotland. If you look at what he's done in Manchester, he's reorganised travel infrastructure. I think it's £2 for a bus pass, a daily bus pass in Manchester. Yep. I think, tell me if I'm wrong. That's quite a far cry from the £25 we pay from Glasgow to Edinburgh in Scotland. He's introduced the bed every night scheme, so to get homeless people off the street. So we know that people are falling through the cracks in Glasgow and in Edinburgh. And he has enforced stricter housing standards and rogue landlords. Like every country could benefit from that. And actually, under his tenure, economy grew faster than any other English city in, obviously, the UK. That included London. So I think he's called the King of the North for a reason.
He is. It's a title that I think, not him himself, but his pals certainly like to kind of band around. Dougie, can we expect the Scottish Daily Express to swing its support behind the next Labour leader?
Well, obviously we are, like Ruth, sceptical, maybe for different reasons. Right away, my immediate concern is we're really going to hand the SNP more power to make a complete mess of things.
That's I think, we come on to the nuts and bolts of that in a minute, but I think it's kind of, we're a bit vague on exactly what he means by more devolution.
I mean, the first thing you'd say is, look, this is all just words in a speech. And I think as political geeks sometimes put far too much emphasis on these set-piece speeches, the same way that, there's an obsession with FMQs and PMQs. They don't really mean anything to your average voter who just wants to feel better in his pocket. They just want a pound in the pocket to be worth that bit more. They want to live their life, live a reasonably happy life without struggling on the breadline, and yet that's the situation we find ourselves in. Is devolving power? He spoke about it before, when he was Manchester Mayor, about, he even spoke about getting rid of the Barnett formula. He's rode back on that already.
Back on that, we should say, yeah.
Is he going to roll back on all this? One thing I do agree with him on, though, is John Swinney was very quick today to say, no, he's completely wrong about people in Dundee. They don't feel distant from Holyrood. And yet, just as he was saying that in typical John Swinney fashion, new research dropped from the University of Edinburgh, which proves that they do feel, a majority of Scots do feel distant. They feel that Holyrood is too Edinburgh-centric.
Absolutely, it was an Edinburgh bias.
And it prefers urban areas over rural areas. So, as usual, John Swinney with his finger off the pulse, I think, is something we're becoming used to.
He did say the UK Parliament wasn't working for people of Scotland, though. Did he?
Yeah, which I think is definitely a sentiment that people agree with. I think a lot of the things you mentioned there, Ruth, are achievements that Andy Burnham has, racked up. I think there are other leaders in sort of Manchester council areas that would point to that this kind of thing was going on even before he became the Metro Mayor. And the kind of bigger question is, can he apply the things he's doing in Manchester to a scale, UK wide? Because a lot of the things that he has done in Manchester, for example, on buses, I mean, Andy Burnham is a success story, but that's a devolve thing. It's not up to Andy Burnham, but it's the
it's also a colleague and friend of the show, Ben Borland of mine is obviously, a colleague of mine is from that area, and he was quite insistent that all Burnham's really done is paint the buses yellow.
They do look very fetching, to be fair.
The actual nuts and bolts of it were kind of there already, but he's going to be PM in a few weeks. He's setting out his stall, but the proof's going to be the pudding. People are fed up of kind of words, and they want to see action.
Ruth, do you think Andy Burnham is winning in the short term just by not being Keir Starmer? Do you think people will just give him the benefit of the doubt because he's a bit breezier in the way he talks? He is northern, as he reminds ourselves every 2 minutes.
Yeah, he's relatable. I definitely think that I can relate to him 100%. I think with Keir Starmer, I think obviously after the 14-year Tory rule ended, everybody kind of had like a weight lifted off their shoulders. Everybody exhaled, and we were expecting change and great things to come from Starmer, but nothing really happened apart from making the winter fuel payment means tested and going after disability benefits. It was disappointing, and it was interesting to see how somebody could win a landslide victory in July 2024, but then be pushed out 2 years later.
Well, how many PMs are we on now since Brexit? I've generally lost count now. Seven, yeah. I mean,
on to 7 now.
Well, since Brexit,
since the
Boris,
last 10 years,
Rishi, so before since Brexit, but since the Brexit vote, and you've got Cameron, Theresa May.
I know these things are important to express to separate out the Brexit vote and the actual act of Brexit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
4 years in between them, right?
I think we are now averaging one about every 18 months to 2 years. So, I mean, we're at 2029, I think, is the likely date of the next UK general elections. Andy Burnham maybe could clock up 3 years if he's doing well. I think back to your point though, Dougie. I wrote a short column on this week, which you can find on the Daily Record website if you're keen. But basically saying that for all Andy Burnham likes to talk about his record in Manchester and all the things that Ruth mentions, which are real achievements, ultimately the cost of living is what's either going to make or break him. I mean, that's ultimately what it did for Starmer. Even with Starmer ahead of the 2024 election, he tried to dampen down expectations, and people still got extremely hacked off with them very, very quickly. I think a large part of that, as we've mentioned in this podcast many, many times, is because people flinch when they go to supermarkets and do their average shop, and they go, how much? And rightly or wrongly, everyone looks to who's in power and says, well, what are you doing about it? And I think with Burnham, if he's lucky, the ceasefire between America and Iran will hold, and the sort of tensions in the Middle East will quieten down, and maybe calmer international markets will lower the cost of energy and blah blah blah. But I mean that's an optimistic case.
Yeah, and I feel like quite a lot of places are, because it is about when you go to the shops, and I'm going to use an example. It wasn't a shop, but I'll just say a well-known fast food company who I used to work for in Glasgow many years ago. I took my wife and I took our daughter there yesterday, and it was £30, and I'm sitting there thinking, in my day, this would have been 12 quid, and yet now it's exploded. And I don't think that's going to come down, and that's where people feel it. So we might see it at the pumps, we might see it in our energy bills, which are big things, don't get me wrong. But Tesco ain't going to slash their prices, and I kind of feel like the genie's out the bottle with that, and I don't really know how to get it back in. The only way to get it back in is to get people earning more. That just pushes prices back up. So I mean, we'll wait and see. It might be, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Maybe Andy Burnham will be a lucky PM. And I'm just not convinced that dishing out more powers to Holyrood is an answer to that. That was a kind of gist of his kind of. If anything, I think Westminster should be wanting to claw some powers back, to be perfectly frank.
Centralising the economy though, and putting more money into high streets, creating more jobs, will that not help?
I've got to say I'm all for. I'm actually a fan of devolving power, but I think right now you've got a government in Edinburgh that's hell-bent on using every single power it's got to push for the breakup of the UK, and it doesn't really matter about the economic impact of that or anything. Why would you hand them more tools on that? I think that's my issue with it.
I think the point Ruth makes about it's a lot easier in England and Wales for Andy Burnham to give powers to councils, or even it's kind of been mooted more regions like Greater Manchester as a region. In Scotland, though, you know, most of these powers are set at Holyrood, and Holyrood could, if it chose, already give more powers to local councils. There is an argument that maybe Andy Burnham could kind of go round Holyrood to give councils certain powers. I think that's on certain things. I mean, this is such a dry example. What's that, sorry? Yes, well, the mayor thing, I mean, this is just my own personal opinion. I'm well in favour of places like a sort of Greater Glasgow region and Edinburgh as well, having a kind of figurehead like that. I don't think there'd be a magic wand, but I think they've been proven in Liverpool and Manchester to kind of, I think they do work. And I think in the sort of devolution era, the Holyrood era, kind of strong voices in the big cities like Dundee and Aberdeen as well have kind of been lost because the focus now is so relentless in Holyrood. So I'm with Andy Burnham on that. But you know, Holyrood does like to centralise powers, so the idea that they're going to give them out to councils.
Well, John Swinney's already said he doesn't like the idea of mayors.
I know. I've asked about this, you know, myself. I mean, yeah, who knows? We'll wait and see. Just on Dookie's point, Ruth, do you think Andy Burnham could be a lucky PM? You know, maybe this time it'll finally click into place, even though it hasn't for the last 6 PMs or whatever it is.
I hope so, because it would be nice to have some consistency, wouldn't it? Maybe good things could actually happen if we had some consistency. I don't think he's going to get lucky, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm sceptical though.
On that positive note, let's just move away from Manchesterism and turn our attentions to the city where this podcast is being recorded. And as we mentioned, Glasgow might not have a Metro Mayor, but in 3 weeks' time it will have the Commonwealth Games, which are coming back again to the city for the second time in just 12 years. And that's after the Australian state of Victoria, which was supposed to be hosting this year's games, pulled out, basically claiming the event was simply too expensive. And the organisers of the Commie Games kind of scouted around and decided Glasgow was the best place to have them. And that, you know, we'll get into the detail of that in a moment. But John Swinney, he was out and about this morning promoting the Commonwealth Games at a media event that the Daily Record, and I'm presuming the Daily Express, were not invited to. But I have listened back to some of the comments that he made, and he was basically asked that, you know, in a charitable way, you know, there's quite a lot of renovation work, redevelopment going on in Glasgow city centre right now. George Square being a prominent example, Argyle Street being another. And John Swinney was asked, do you think Glasgow's ready to host? And he said, the city is, quote, looking great. Dougie, I'll come at you first. Is Glasgow looking great?
No. I think that's very much the words of a man who's never actually walked through Glasgow. You know, John Swinney lives in nice rural Perthshire and works in Edinburgh. He's probably never wandered down Argyle Street in his puff. We sent our man out, John Glover, to check Glasgow out this afternoon, and you can find out what he found on the Daily Express Facebook page later on today, Scottish Daily Express. I myself ran into work this morning, and that took me down the Trongate area, and it was awful. There's people actually sleeping rough, which is
it is a rising problem.
It's a rising problem.
Yeah, that is
messy, litter everywhere. You know, you come in, some of it's not. You know, no one could have foreseen the massive fire in Union Street. But you know, it's not great at the front. You know, we're going to be hosting a big part of the world, and you know, the front entrance of Central's not even open yet. I don't know when it's going to open. I think they said this month, but we shall wait and see. You know, all the work that's going on, George Square, Argyle Street. They spent 2 years doing Sucky Hall Street, and it looks the exact same.
A few more trees, I think.
Maybe. I mean, I don't want to say it's awful, Glasgow, because I think there is a tendency talk it down.
There's a lot going on at once, though.
But there's an awful lot, and it's just, as someone who's lived in or around this city his entire life, and I appreciate there'll be an element of youthful nostalgia about this, but it's a complete shadow of itself, and it's kind of late 90s, early noughties heyday when it was a real place to be, a lot of energy, a very vibrant place. It now just feels really, really tired, and you know, John Swinney's not going to say anything else. He's not going to say, oh, Glasgow's not ready for this. It's a complete shit tip. But, you know, people who see that and people who live and work here don't recognise the Glasgow that he's talking
Ruth,
about.
can you make a more positive case than Dougie's for Glasgow? Is there things that we can be more upbeat about, and along with the coming of the Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, I think I do agree with everything Dougie's saying though, but Glasgow's full of culture and diversity, and the people are really, really amazing. But the Commonwealth Games, I mean, it's like a scaled down version of the
It is
Olympics,
very much so, yeah.
and it'll give rising stars, athletes, a great outlet for a stepping stone into their career, and onto bigger events. It's expected to bring £150 million to the city. That's at no cost to the public purse. So with that, there's going to be opportunities for jobs, training for people. And then on top of that, there's going to be visitor spending that'll help the local economy, and it's just good for civic pride. But I do agree with Dougie. Like, I think John Swinney's so far-fetched from like the reality of Glasgow. I mean, there's like 3 vacant fire sites: the Union Street corner fire site, the O2 ABC, and Glasgow School of Art. I mean, it's in George Square, like the heart of Glasgow's all shut down right now because it's getting work done to it, which obviously it's getting work done, but yeah, it's not the same city that I moved to in 2014.
It's definitely an unfortunate coincidence or set of timings that the George Square work and the Argyle Street work is going on, but obviously when this was all signed off by the council, they didn't realise the Commonwealth Games were going to be coming. But the issue Ruth touches on about fires, I mean, when the Union Corner building burned down, I mean, I think that was a lot of people thought was not again, not another one.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact it does take so long for these gap sites to be filled, I know that, you know, it's really complicated with building ownership and insurance and tracking down owners and all the rest of it. But I mean, I can't even remember when that Victoria nightclub fire was in Sauchiehall Street. I mean, and that's still a very prominent gap site in the city centre. Obviously, there's the art school further up Sauchiehall Street, and we all know how complicated that issue is. And the fact the ABC has been demolished, but we still haven't seen the replacement building there. It kind of does make you despair. I mean, I think obviously Glasgow is a big sprawling city, and a lot of this is concentrated in the city centre. I mean, obviously, I mean, I live in Glasgow. I'm going to, you know, be biased in favour of it, but I do feel, you know, it's been since COVID, since 2020, 21. You know, a lot of the city centre relied heavily on offices and people coming into work. And I mean, the Daily Record's like no other city centre business, in that, you know, we have a different kind of office, different kind of working model. People coming in less often. You come in, you know, kind of when you want, all that, all the rest of it. I think Glasgow's been harder hit than other places. I mean, Edinburgh. Everyone likes to compare the two. Edinburgh obviously has such a high amount of tourism now that the city centre is kind of busy 12 months out of the year.
I think it's interesting if you said you moved here in 2014. Obviously, that was the last time we hosted the Commonwealth Games, and the difference in atmosphere and excitement around it is unbelievable.
It was about 10 times the size of it there.
But I just feel like back then there was a real. I mean, I quite enjoyed it when the Commonwealth Games were here the first time. And this time, I don't even. Well, obviously it's in TNT Sport.
Well,
so,
that's a major
you know,
downside. The BBC
I don't even
have
know.
it.
I don't even know how much of it, you know, we would actually watch. And obviously, I think it's a great event. The Commonwealth Games. It's certainly worth keeping, but I think it does need to. You know, it's not a mini Olympics anymore.
No,
and I think we need to keep it in perspective, maybe.
and there was, as you pointed out, back in 2014, there was a lot of infrastructure investment. You know, the Chris Hoy velodrome was built, especially. There was upgrade works to, I think, Tollcross swimming pool, whereas this time round, all the kind of venues have been used as is.
I think as well, actually, 2014, I sometimes trace Glasgow's decline back to that. I remember, if I remember correctly, there was some sort of, argument or row over Usain Bolt, who was competing at the Commonwealth Games back then, and he said that I think he basically said that he preferred the Olympics in London, or the Olympics in London were more important to him, and people were genuinely upset about it.
They
and
were.
I was a bit like, when did Glasgow A start taking itself so seriously, and B, like, obviously an athlete's going to, and I think you can trace the decline of City.
Are we pinning it on Usain Bolt? Is this what we're saying?
Because people just started to think, oh, well, that sense of entitlement. I think that people must love Glasgow so much and as much as we love it, and I think that's.
We'll need to reach out to the
civic leaders have thought, well, there's no point in doing anything to it because people are going to defend it regardless.
We'll reach out to the Jamaican Olympic Committee for the response to these bold allegations. I think, though, what we're talking about here, Ruth, does this come back to kind of tie it to Andy Burnham in a roundabout way? Does Glasgow need a bigger voice? Does it need someone to kind of stand up and fight for its corner, maybe in the way that Andy Burnham did in Manchester?
Yeah, I think the way he transformed Manchester is genuinely applaudable. I love Manchester. I think Glasgow does need the same investment. It needs the travel infrastructure is shocking in Glasgow. It's impossible to get a bus, so it would be nice to see almost like a circuit breaker for Glasgow, for sure.
I think that's a good point. On the other hand, if it's just going to be another SNP drone who's going to do whatever, John Swinney tells him, then what's the point in it? But I do agree with that.
I think empowering communities is the way forward anyway. So if it's successful, youth clubs are going to reopen, libraries are going to be saved from closure, high streets revived. Who doesn't want any of that? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's a good point to end this episode. I know I certainly could bore on about the state of Glasgow for hours, but I will spare you that for another episode. So just in the meantime, thanks very much to Ruth. Thanks to Dougie for joining me, and thanks also to Daryl from the Records video team who produced this episode. And of course, you can listen to all episodes of Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Watch them on the Records YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast. So cheerio for now.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.